Okay. So here's what happens with absolute value. Nothing happens to x, and the y's get absoluted. So here's what we did in grade 11, since you apparently don't remember. The absolute value of -4 is just 4. The absolute value of 4 is 4. So what was kind of the idea? Think about distance, right? If you traveled south 4 kilometers, it's just 4 kilometers. If you traveled north 4 kilometers, it's just 4 kilometers. It's the magnitude of the number without the directional part of the number. Okay? Okay, so what is the new point? So if this is your original, what is your new point if it's transformed? New point is going to be, so nothing happens to x at all. And then what's the absolute value of -8? +8. When you absolute f of x is the same thing as a y. F of x is the same thing as a y. Y equals f of x, so that's the same thing. So nothing happens to x. What's the absolute value of 10? 10. And nothing happens to x, 3. What's the absolute value of 0? 0. So let's make some general rules. If the original y value is positive, then what would happen? Just stays. If the original y value is negative, it would change to positive. And if the original y value is 0, then it would stay. So that is your rules. Okay, so here's a graph. And we're going to graph the absolute value of it. Okay, I'm going to treat these like chunks. What would you do with this chunk of the graph right here? Basically, stay or change? Stay. So that is going to stay because it's positive, so it stays. Okay, and now I'm going to talk about this chunk of the graph. It would flip, it would change. So I'm going to specifically take this coordinate right here, which is 0, -2, and on the new graph, it will go to 0, +2. And then, can you visualize that all flipping to the positive? Negative to positive. If I asked you this question, this one always tricks people, without graphing stuff, what if I didn't graph it and I said, what's the range of the absolute value? What's the range of an absolute value graph? 0 to infinity. On this one, yeah. 0. Because there's going to be no negative y values. The lowest y value was 0 then. Okay, ready. This is the original graph, this one in this corner. So we're going to do this. We're going to be doing the absolute value of the graph -2. Here we're going to do the absolute value of the graph -2. I just said the same thing, but can you tell that those aren't the same thing? Okay, so there's absoluting and there's moving down. Do you think the order matters? Yes. What would you do first? Would you want to absolute and then move down, or would you want to move down and then absolute? You would have to move down and then absolute. Because of it's like a bracket situation. You're moving down and then you're absoluting it. What do you think about this then? What would this do? You would absolute it, and then an after is moving down. So what I do is I physically do this. I draw my graphs. So let's draw this graph shifted down to, and I'm going to just do it lightly. Like this. I'm going to just kind of dash it. If you could move all these points down to, and I'm going to suggest making sure your arrow is at least past the x-axis here. The zeros are important because then that's like the changing spots. Sometimes you change spots there. So make sure you do all your zeros. Zeros are important to put on there. Okay, now we're going, so that's done. Now we're going to absolute. So which part would you want to stay? What part would you want to change? So this part I'm going to stay. So I'm going to make it a little darker. So that part of the graph is going to stay. And the rest of it's going to change from negative to positive. Okay, now, second time we're going to do it, we said the order mattered. We're going to absolute it, and then we're going to move it down. So absoluting it, we actually already did that, so I'm just going to kind of draw that sketch. So that's the absolute graph. We already did that. Then you take that one and you move it down. So from there you move it down.